About 65 years ago, I was sitting where you're sitting now. I was raised in a non-religious family in the New York area, and no clue about traditional Judaism, no contact, no experience, until a certain experience led me to open the question in my mind, and then I mounted an investigation. An investigation like this has different dimensions. On the one hand, you want to see whether the way these people live, what they say, what they think, makes sense. Internally, is it logical? Do they engage in self-criticism? Do they admit mistakes? Do they admit to unsolved problems? That's testing the intellectual character of the people and their commitment and their investigation. A second dimension is externally. What evidence is there that this is more than just a very clever game? Chess is very challenging intellectually, and it has great insights, and it has better and worse strategies, but it doesn't mean anything beyond being a pastime, an intellectual challenge. Is this system of life rooted in history, as Rabbi Schiller said? Does it have a unique impact on the world? Whether it's Nobel Prize winners, or it's the continuity of a culture for 3,700 years, unlike any other human culture? And an impact on the development of world culture, where 40% of the world traces its basis to our book. That's the Christians and the Muslims. And indirectly, the pursuit of justice and the concept of human beings as a single family is something that we contributed thousands of years ago and now has become common thought, common coin across the world. There are external connections to the way the world runs, and as Rabbi Schiller said again, evidence, clues, hints, supports from the history that we know and the contemporary world in which we live. That's the second dimension. And then there's a third dimension. Where is my place in this system? How will I fit in? What role will I play? What can I contribute in addition to what can I benefit from? What can I assimilate? And sitting in your chair 65 years ago, certain aspects of the third dimension bothered me. For one thing, many of you have had this experience, and if you haven't, I hope you will have it. You visit a traditional family for a Shabbat meal. After the meal, there's the benching, the grace after meals. And if you have a 7-year-old child at the table, you get a good experience of a rapid-fire machine gun, because he rattles off the Hebrew syllables at lightning speed, and you think, I'll never do that. I'll never be able to do that. He's 7. I'm 22. I'm already 15 years behind. How will I ever catch up? What's he going to be at 22? I'm always going to be behind. I'm always going to be second class. I'm always going to be ultimately an outsider. Is there any point in my getting involved in this? Do I have a place in this? Divine Providence provided me with teachers and guides, and they shared some wisdom with me, which I would like to pass on to you. Maimonides says that because we have free will, every human being could be as great as Moses. Exercise your free will, and you could be as great a tzaddik, as righteous as Moses. I thought to myself, that's unbelievable. What? I could equal Moses? Look where I came from. Look at my limitations. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman wrote an essay in which he shared my worries. Rabbi Chanan said that if I, Rabbi Chanan, would work my whole life and I lived 1,000 years, I wouldn't come up to Moses' ankles. So I thought, right, that sounds right. But then what did Maimonides mean? Rabbi Hanan says, Maimonides meant this. Moses dedicated all of his gifts, all of his talents, all of his abilities to serving God. Every one of us could do the same thing. We have different talents and abilities, different gifts. That's God's business, not my business. My job is to do the best with what I have. And if I do the best with what I have, I can sit at Moses' right hand. So I thought, all right. So there's a place for me. Maybe I will never rattle off the benching the way that 7-year-old does. But that's not my job. That's not my position. My position is to use the gifts that God gave me. My special gifts. The second thing that bothered me, and this I witnessed in Rabbi Schiller's office, when a reporter of the New York Times asked him, would you call yourselves born-again Jews? I hope you never have any experience with the New York Times. Rabbi Schiller said, of course not. We don't kick over our past. The past that I was born into isn't an accident. Divine Providence put me in this family, in this century, in this city, in this school system, because with my past, I have a contribution to make that no one else can make. We don't discard the past. We look at the past as the platform for the future that we can become. That's what he told the reporter. And in the article in the New York Times, it said, Rabbi Schiller says that we are born-again Jews. That was one of my experiences with the media. But it means that I don't turn my back on my past. On the contrary, I say to myself, God put me into this family, into this society, into this educational system, into this non-Jewish culture, because that's the platform from which I will build my place within the Jewish people, my place within the Jewish family, to gain from it my growth and to make my contribution. There are different things that people do in our community. Some of you are already aware of this. There are doctors, and there are college professors, and there are very successful businessmen, and there are people who study Torah and people who teach Torah. What's more valuable? What's more important? Are all lives equal? Are all roles equal? Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the great philosopher, and you can quote me. People think of him as a Kabbalist, but he was a great philosopher. Wrote a classic work, The Path of the Just, and in the last chapter, he describes the concept of a chassid. A chassid is a person who is spectacularly spiritual. His spirituality is as close to perfect as a human being can manage. And he says, the concept of chassid applies to different types of life. And it applies equally. The concept of chassid applies in the same sense to entirely different lives. For example, the life of the head of a yeshiva who's studying Torah and teaching his students and writing books of Torah research, that's one life. Second life is the life of a person who has his own business. He runs his own business, he's independent. And the third is a person who's hired to do a job. All three can qualify for the title of chassid. True, being a chassid as the head of a yeshiva will entail a certain type of activity. Being a chassid as the head of a business will entail a different type of activity. Being a chassid as a hired worker entails a different type of activity. But in all three cases, the concept is the same. The concept is that you're dedicated to living life hand in hand with the Creator. As the Shulchan Aruch starts with the quote of the verse, Shivisi Hashem L'Regli Somid, I've placed God before me continuously. It's a life of continuous God consciousness. I'm not in this alone. I'm never alone. The smallest number in the Jewish lexicon is 2, not 1. Since the creation, everything is 2 or more, never 1. There's only 1 before the creation. When I exist together with. It's always together with. So the place that I will occupy will be dependent upon my gifts, my abilities, my circumstances, my resources. But if I enter into it in a dedicated way, if I devote myself to it, if I live it hand in hand together with the Creator, then I can qualify for the title Chassid just as much as the one who founds the yeshiva and teaches in the yeshiva. The closeness to God can be equal in all cases. There's one other idea that bothered me. I want to share with you the way to look at it. One of the greatest mitzvos in the Torah is love of God. We say it in the Shema, you should love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Maimonides, using the Song of Songs as his basis, says love of God, we would use the word in contemporary English, it's like infatuation. You think of that girl, you can't get her out of your mind. Time spent with her is golden, precious. Time in which you're divorced from her, when you're not together with her, weighs on you as dead time. The picture of loving God and the ideal circumstances is constant infatuation with the Creator. When I read that, it bothered me because it sounds very exclusive. If that's what's gripping you, if that's what's absorbing your focus, is there any time for anything else? Sunsets? Beethoven? The forest? Great poetry? Is this going to simply crush all the rest of life? Displace it? Then I thought to myself, is love really like that? I'm married, we have 6 children. I love all of them. How am I going to manage that? Oh, I've got it. Sunday for my wife, Monday for the first child, Tuesday for the second child. Very easy. 7 days a week, 7 people, and just divide it up. Love isn't like that. Love isn't competitive. Love is complementary and reinforcing. If I sit and watch a sunset with my wife, I enjoy the sunset more because I'm sharing it with her. And the fact that we are sharing the pleasure of the sunset cements our relationship. It isn't a competition where I have to divide my heart between them. I love my wife more because together we built a family. And I love my children more because they are the people who, together with the wife whom I love, we brought into the world. Love doesn't have to be competitive. Love can be complementary. And the same thing is true with love of God. Love of God is a verb and it's an adverb. It's a love, but it isn't exclusive. And I have heard people who are worried about this. Let me just remind you that God commands us to love other people. So it can't be that if you love God and really love God, you can't love anyone else. He told us to love other people. It has to be compatible. When I look at a sunset and I think that God put such beauty into the world, and He gave me the sensitivity to be aware of it. I'm not aware that animals or birds that have eyesight superior to ours stare at sunsets. I'm not aware of that because they don't appreciate the beauty. So as you go through life and something impresses you, your eyes are open and you experience something and it gives you a thrill, you think, thank you. Thank you, because I know that you're providing this for me. You want this for me. You want this to be a link with which I can relate to you, bind to you. So the love of God is an adverb accompanying a person throughout his life. These pieces of advice, these pieces of wisdom, sustained me and helped me understand that when there's an element in the tradition which jars my intuition, I should think about it again and question it and get advice concerning it, because very deep people lived this tradition and articulated it. As one fellow said to me when I answered his questions, boy, you seem to have thought of everything. And I said, a lot of clever people have been thinking about it for 3,000 years. So we have a lot of answers. That's quite true. You here are here for dipping your toes in the water. I hope the water is comfortable. I hope that the aspect of the sea is inspiring so that you'll come back for a real full swim. Have a good day.